The following tutorial video covers SweetCG Multisport Scoreboard's user interface for American football. This video will demonstrate the user controls and customization options, as well as the free graphics package for American football. This video will not explore the creation of graphics in third-party character generators, but it will reference the various key value pairs that are used with those third-party products. We will also spend some time in the session editor, which is not generally accessed during games, but is used for changing wording and making other significant changes to a game session. To begin, let's select the American Football session template. Once the session has loaded, let's also load the free graphics package. As with all new sessions, the program loads to the team details page. From here, we can set up the team information. Long and short team names are generally required, as is team color. All of the rest of the fields are optional, based on your intent to use graphics that include that data. To save time, I'm going to load the two sample team profiles. The roster for the men's profile is actually made for baseball, and the women's roster is for soccer, but that's okay for this demonstration. I'm also going to come over to the Match Details tab and load the sample file. I'm also going to load the sample files for the marquee and sponsor controls. Now that we have a full complement of data in our session, let's start looking at how this static data is utilized. We'll begin with the free graphics package. Let's go to the graphics section and select Matchup. We can see several team details in the matchup graphic, but let's say you don't know the team records. We can easily hide that and other elements from the graphic by right-clicking the control button. Many of the graphics control buttons have options just like this, and some buttons, like the Scorebug button and the Keys to the Game buttons, have some user tips if you hover the mouse cursor over the button. For example, with Keys to the Game, the keys are provided in the Match Details tab. You can show this graphic in pregame, and then at halftime or postgame, you can refer back to this graphic. Right-click the control button and mark a key as successful. You can see the text color for the first key has changed. Some buttons have some specialized wording that can be customized. Again, with Keys to the Game, if you right-click the button, you can see down at the bottom of the menu is Custom Wording 1. If you wanted something different, such as Road to the Championship, you can change that here. And then, instead of keys, you would enter significant milestones for the team from their season. Lastly, you can configure a graphic to display for a timed length. A value of 0 will remain indefinitely, but entering a value of 5 will display the graphic for 5 seconds, then automatically remove it. We won't cover every single option available for every button, but we will highlight some unique configuration options for some of the other buttons later in the video. Let's take a quick look at how this static data is used in third-party CGs. Come over to External CG Settings and Controls, and then click the Output Keys sub-tab. Here you can see all of the key value pairs that appear in the XML and CSV output files. Let's expand the visiting team. We can see all of the key names for the various visiting team fields, and then the current values of those keys. If you are creating your own graphics package in a third-party system that supports external data sources, you would link a text field to one of these keys. It would automatically display the value as it appears here. Some systems also allow linking images to key value pairs. This system lets you create an elaborate graphics package that all reference these individual keys. Then when the values change in SweetCG, The data displayed across multiple pages in your CG project will update also, saving you a lot of time. Let's change the visiting mascot from Warriors to Spartans. We immediately see the value change in the output file and would expect to see it update also in your third-party character generator. When creating graphics in a third-party CG, you can reference this tab to verify the spelling of individual keys. Let's go back to the Graphics Control tab, then also select the Game Status tab. Most of your time in a game session will be spent here. From this single tab, you have access to all required controls once the game begins. Let's start by a brief overview of the various panels. Along the top, we can see the sponsor carousel and marquee controls. Let's get those running by clicking these play buttons. Below these controls is a game status panel with score and timeouts left for each team. In the center of this panel is a button for toggling the ball possession. Below that panel are two team panels with various controls. To the right of those panels is the clock panel. From this panel we can adjust the quarter, start and stop the game clock, and modify the clock. In the bottom half of the user interface is the down and distance panel. From this panel we can control the down and distance as well as the ball spot with the slider control. At the very bottom we have two tabs, one for kick attempts and another for looking at the line score and making quick corrections to different stats. Before we do much with the user interface, let's take a quick look at the session editor, accessible from the session menu. We'll be visiting the session editor often in this tutorial, but it's mostly for the purpose of helping you understand how you can change wording and make small configuration changes to the session. During an actual game, there should be very little reason to access the session editor. The session editor is also a powerful resource for creating your own sport controls. Check out our tutorial series on sessions and templates for a full breakdown of the session editor and how you can create a new sport from scratch. But for the pre-built templates like this one, it's important not to modify these controls too much, or else you may see unexpected behavior in the user interface. The line status table allows you to modify individual stats for each team, and do so per quarter. You can also add additional overtime periods should the need arise. These labels here are used to identify some of the quick correction controls in the user interface. We can see the name is composed of XML output keys, with each surrounded by percentage signs. We'll get back to what those mean in just a minute. Down here are specialty counters for values that need to exist outside the line status table. For football, we use these for timeouts, which you can see is also named with dynamic keys. Down and distance, ball spot, and kick attempt adjustment do not have dynamic keys in their name. Toggles are used for a variety of elements, including ball possession, flags and timeouts, as well as touchdowns, points involving a kicker, and two-point conversions. Down here at the bottom are macro controls. Most controls in the user interface are macros and allow you to save time by executing multiple actions with a single button click. Up here at the top right corner are clock settings as well. Underneath clock settings are context values. We're going to take a closer look at these. We'll refer to context value items quite a bit throughout this tutorial. Context values are an important part of Multisport Scoreboard because they provide us with the means of changing specific wording that is used in the sport. Let's scroll down about 1/4 of the way. We see this header called Counter Pairings. Each counter pairing applies to two counters in the line status table, as well as specialty counters. We can see the output key that you would see in the XML or CSV output file, for which this context value item is made. Then in parentheses, we can see the key name for this context value item. context value item 1 is named score, and that value can be changed. Now let's look over here at counters 2 and 3. The names of those counters are vname short, context value item 1, and hname short, context value item 1. These currently translate to tech score and state score. Let's close the session editor and come over to graphics control. Select the graphics group and display the stats graphic. The center column of this graphic contains context value items 1, 2, and 3. Now let's go back to external CG settings and controls, and then output keys. Expand context value items, and we can see all of the context values. If you were to build a stats graphic like the one we just saw, but in your third-party CG, you would use the context value items here for the names of the various stats. And then the stats themselves are available in the game status group here. You'll see that there are a lot of context value items. Items 7 through 15 aren't really used on their own in American football. They're part of something called logical outputs, and we'll cover those later. Let's take a look at items 18 through 20. Right now, these say games, yards, and tackles. These three context value items are part of player headshots, which is the next part of our tutorial. Let's come over to the Team Details tab and look at one of the team rosters. We can see that the last three fields in the player editor have the same names. We can use these fields for any bioinformation or stat that you want, or we can leave it blank. These fields can't be used for automatically updating player stats in a game, so you won't be able to assign points to a player automatically as a game unfolds. But you could manually enter in game stats here during halftime or a timeout, should you choose to utilize these fields in that manner. To change the name of the stat, let's come back to the session editor. The first three fields in context values are for the miscellaneous roster fields. Let's change tackles to points, and then close the session editor. We can see that context value item 20 has updated. Let's select the first player in the roster and give them some random values in these fields. Now we'll go to game status. Let's click the headshot button for the visiting team. A screen appears that lists the entire team roster. Select the first player in the list. Let's select a player for the home team as well. Back over at the output keys, let's collapse context value items and expand visiting and home team players. We can see that player 1 fields all have information now. Let's click the visiting team headshot button again and select the second player. Take note that this player's headshot is actually the team logo. Any player that doesn't have a headshot will use the team logo in its place. Now we see that player's data in the Visit Player 1 fields. The Player 2 fields are used for the kicker for each team, so you can display the kicker's headshot before a field goal or point after touchdown. SweetCG Multisport Scoreboard allows 3 player slots, but only 2 are used in football at this time, so you can disregard the third player data set. Let's see how these are used in the built-in CG. Let's come over to Graphics Control. When this tab loads, the NDI feed sometimes takes a few seconds to appear. Let's show the score bug. And now let's click the Visit Player button. This animates the Visit Player 1 data. Headshots have a default timer of 7 seconds, which can be changed. So by default, you can leave this button alone and let it expire on its own. Right-click the button and we're presented with options to configure the headshot. any of these player biofields or miscellaneous stats are configurable to show or hide. In a real game, you don't need to worry about getting every field filled in the roster file. You can hide what you don't have access to or just don't want to display. We also have this Kick Attempt with Kicker button. We can use that to display the kicker's headshot, but we'll come back to that at a later point in the video. With context values and player selection behind us, let's take a look at how we score a typical football game. In this top panel is the ball possession button. When we click it, we're given a notification that the change of ball possession will set the down and distance, but not credit the team with a first down. We can accept this or cancel the action. When we accept it, we see that these two team panels change size. The team panels will always give you the option to select a player for a headshot, take a team timeout, or perform a quick score adjustment. But when a team has ball possession, additional buttons are presented for touchdowns, 2-point conversions, and adding or subtracting total yards. Points like safeties are performed with the quick adjustment controls. Let's give the home team a touchdown. We can assign points in the quick score adjustment, but all that does is add points to the team one at a time. On the other hand, the touchdown button will assign 6 points to the team, but it will also activate the touchdown toggle, which will animate an animation on the score bug. It will also load the player selection screen, so you can select which player made the touchdown. If you don't want to select a player, you can click Cancel. Let's select a player. At your convenience, you can click the Team Headshot button to animate the headshot. You can do this right after the touchdown or wait for a camera to get a good hero shot of the player. Let's go to the output keys and see how the toggle aspect plays out for third-party CGs. Expand, counter, and toggle images. There are 6 toggles in total. Let's scroll down and look at the data keys for toggles 1 through 3. Toggle 1 is the ball possession toggle. Toggle 2 is for flags, and toggle 3 is for touchdowns. Each toggle has a primary and alternate value that will always be opposite of each other. The raw value is a true-false value that can be used in third-party CGs that allow certain values to trigger actions within the CG engine. The toggle name is simply for identification purposes. And then we have these 2 image paths. Toggles can have images associated with their true and false values. We can see those in this Toggle Images tab. Here we can see all 6 toggles. Each toggle has a true and false image preloaded in the session template. You can provide your own versions of these to complement your graphics package in your third-party CG. Here we have, for ball possession, a false image that is really just a PNG file that is completely transparent. You may notice that all of the false images are blank. This will probably be the case most of the time for integrating with third-party CGs, but it really depends on your needs. The true image, on the other hand, is a yellow underline that can span the team's name box on the score bug. In practice, when ball possession changes, the yellow line will switch from one team to another. You can see that these other true images are pretty basic and really just provided for demonstration purposes. In most cases, you'll provide your own graphics to match the look of your score bug. Let's go back to the output keys. If we scroll to the right, we can see the rest of the image path. As we toggle the ball possession, we can see the 2 image paths toggle back and forth. In a third-party CG, binding an image to either of these image keys would cause the image to update to the paths shown here. Toggle 2 functions as the flag toggle, and toggle 6 is for timeouts. Let's come back to graphics control and see how these play out in the free graphics package. Now let's click Flag you'll notice the background of the user interface has changed to yellow. You'll also notice there is a progress bar on the button. When it expires, the yellow background goes away. Let's click it again and watch the graphics. A flag indicator appears during the duration of the toggle. By default, the flag and timeout toggles operate on a timer. But we can change that. Let's go to the session editor again. The toggles have a timer value. Possession is set to 0. That means it will only change when the toggle button is clicked. The rest of the toggles all have a timer value of 5 by default. That means they'll stay in a true state for 5 seconds and then return to a false state. Flag and timeout can be changed to 0 if you desire, but touchdown, it's good, and 2-point conversion should not be set to 0 since the touchdown buttons in the user interface are in fact macros and not true toggle buttons. So you would not be able to manually change the touchdown toggle back to false, and the score bug would forever show the touchdown animation. But let's set flag and timeout to 0 and close the session editor. You'll see the progress bars are gone from the 2 buttons. Now clicking flag will activate the flag indicator, but it will stay there until the flag button is clicked again. Some producers may want the timeout and flag indicators to remain visible through the duration of the timeout or deliberation of the flag call amongst the officials. We include this yellow background as a visual cue to the operator so they don't forget to turn off the toggle. Let's move on to the rest of the buttons in the team panel. The timeout button here just sets the timeout toggle. This can be used for media timeouts, injury timeouts, etc., but each team has a timeout button as well. These are macro buttons. They will set the timeout toggle to true, but also subtract 1 timeout from the team. Let's have the visiting team take a timeout. We can see on the score bug that in addition to the visibility of a timeout indicator, one of the timeout bars has gone away. Let's see how this works with the external CGs. Let's come back to the output keys. In the same group as the toggles, we also have counter images. The 6 specialty counters have an image option associated with them. Here's how it works. Let's go to counter images here. For football, we only use images for the timeout counters. Like with toggles, the false image is blank, but we have a slanted dash image for the true state. Now let's go back to the output keys and scroll down to counter 8 images. Each of these counters has 10 image slots associated with them. Right now, image 1 and 2 are true, but 3 through 10 are false. That's because we already took a timeout for the team, and the timeouts remaining for the visiting team is 2. Let's take another timeout for the visiting team. Now only image 1 is true. Let's scroll over and see the image paths. Only counter 8 image 1 shows the counter 8 true image path, while the remaining 9 show the false image path. With this feature, you can create a graphic with 3 timeout images. Link each image to counter 8 image 1 through 3, and automate the images by controlling the timeout count in SuiteCG Multisport Scoreboard. Let's set the timeout to false and move on to the down and distance panel. An important thing to remember is that down and distance is an optional feature in SuiteCG Multisport Scoreboard. Your experience can be as simple or complex as you want. If you don't feel comfortable keeping up with down and distance, game clock, player headshots, or most other features, you really can skip most of these and operate on a bare bones approach while you get more comfortable with the controls. In the top left corner of the panel are 2 buttons. Both of these buttons will set the down to first. The top first down button will set first and 10. The bottom will set first and goal. Both of these buttons will also credit the team with ball possession with a first down. Here in the top center of the panel, we can see the down and distance as well as the ball spot. To advance to second down, click second. A keypad screen appears. To be perfectly clear on this matter, you do not subtract the number of yards gained. You enter the new distance. So, if it was first and 10 and the team gained 2 yards, enter 8 on this screen. Now you can see that we're at second and 8. We'll worry about the ball spot in just a minute. You can see now that the second down button is disabled. Now we can click third down, as well as the 2 first down options, since first down could be the result of any play. Let's say on the second play, the team gets within 1 yard of the first down. Let's click third down, and at the keypad screen, enter a value of 0. Now the down is third and inches. Now let's say on the third down, they get a new first down and are within 10 yards of the end zone. Now we'd select first and goal. For the remaining plays, you can either select the second, third, or fourth down buttons, but for the distance entry, you just click cancel. Or you can use the manual adjustment controls to adjust the down. In either case, the distance doesn't change, unless in the case of a sack. If a sack happens that results in the loss of yards that yields a distance greater than 10, you would enter a value in the distance entry or with the manual controls. Now let's take a look at the ball spot control. The ball spot slider shows a visualization of the football field. At the end of the field, you can see an end zone represented by the team color and their logo. On the far right of this panel is a button labeled Swap End Zones. Clicking this doesn't change the ball spot, but it does change the end zones and the position of the slider bar on the field. This is useful at the beginning of the game when the team end zones are determined and when the end zones change between quarters. Your operator can swap the end zones so the ball direction they see in SweetCG Multisport Scoreboard always matches the ball direction on the field, thereby eliminating confusion on which way to pull the slider. To select a new ball spot, you can drag the slider bar or click on the hash marks to jump to that position. Alternatively, you can adjust in 1 and 5 yard increments in either direction. The down and distance and ball spot controls rely heavily on context value items to determine proper wording. Let's take one more look in the session editor. Let's look at context value items 7 through 14. In most cases, Americans won't want to change anything here, but other cultures have different spelling for first, second, third, etc., and can change the wording accordingly. But let's take a look at value 14. When the ball is on the 50-yard line, the default wording is midfield. If you want it to say on the 50, then you need to enter on the 50. Context value item 13 provides the on the phrase for all other ball spots except midfield. So in this case, you need to provide on the as part of the midfield wording. While we're down here at the bottom of the context value items list, take a quick look at the field goal and PAT wording for kick yard attempt. We'll refer to this in just a few minutes. Let's close the session editor and hop back over to the output keys. Let's collapse the counters and toggles group and expand logical outputs. There are a number of logical outputs here. SweetCG Multisport Scoreboard provides logical output keys for all sports at the same time. So if you're doing football, you can ignore keys for other sports. Their logical outputs will probably look confusing anyway. You can see logical outputs for down and distance, but there are two options for ball spot. One uses the team short name, and the other uses the team mascot. Use whichever one you want. You can also see a true-false key for the red zone. Let's slide the ball spot into the red zone. The status is now true. We can also see the kick attempt logical output. More on that coming up soon. Let's return to graphic controls. If we click the down and distance button, we'll see the current down and distance. Since we're in the red zone, the colors change to reflect that. If you don't want to take the time to track the ball spot, right-click the button and deselect Include Ball Spot. This will only show the down and distance when this button is clicked. Let's look at the kick attempt now. Kick attempt is dependent on the tracking of the ball spot. The kick attempt distance is calculated by taking the ball spot, adding the distance from the line of scrimmage to the ball holder, and also adding the distance of the uprights to the end zone. In American football, those two values typically add up to 17, 7 yards for the ball holder and 10 yards for the depth of the end zone. So 17 is provided as the default kick adjustment value. But for other leagues, like Canadian football, rules are different, so that number can be changed depending on your needs. With the free graphics package, you want to select the kicker before the attempt. So let's select a player to be the kicker. Now, with the ball spot set, we can see the total yard attempt here. Now in the graphics control, we can click Kick Attempt with Kicker, and we can see both the kick attempt yards and the kicker's headshot. If you don't want to include the headshot, right-click the button and deselect Display Kicker Details. As with the other headshots, you can choose which stats to show and hide should you choose to display the kicker at all. Then, if the field goal or PAT is good, click the appropriate button for an It's Good animation, and to automatically add 3 points or 1 point to the team score. We're coming to the end of our tutorial for American football. There are just a few other things to review, so let's get to it. Let's take a look at the clock controls. These are pretty straightforward. A single button starts and stops the clock, and the clock can be reset to the value of the clock as shown for that period in the session editor. Let's take a look at that. We'll go to the session editor one more time. If I change the first quarter clock to 12 minutes, then close the editor and click Reset, the clock will reset to 12 minutes. If the clock operator is slow to stop the clock and needs a 1 or 2 second adjustment, these adjustment buttons offer a quick fix. Running the clock is the most time-consuming task. As of the creation of this tutorial video, there are no automation options for SuiteCG to bring in an external clock data source, but it is on our list of things to add. In the meantime, we do offer a method of pointing a camera at the scoreboard and play clock and performing a picture-in-picture for each clock. This is covered in detail in a separate tutorial video on the clock camera feature. Let's advance to the second quarter. After doing so, be sure to swap the end zones if the teams in your league swap at each quarter. You'll notice the clock has reset on its own as well. If you accidentally advanced to the next quarter and need to go back, we have a means of allowing that as well. Let's select this tab at the bottom left called Line Score and Stat Correction. Sometimes mistakes happen in the learning process or in the organized chaos of a production room or truck. So we want the fixes to be fast and easy. Back up here, if you click Final and confirm the action, the game will enter a final status and the score bug will reflect that. But clicking the final button again will get you back right where you were before. Team score is adjustable only within the current quarter, from the quick adjustment controls here. So if you advance to a new period before noticing an incorrect score, you will not be able to subtract points from here. Instead, you'll want to come to the line score and adjust the score in the appropriate quarter. Likewise, first downs can only be modified as long as the value for the current quarter does not go below 0. However, total yards can be modified so long as the sum of yards from all quarters does not go below 0. Timeouts can be adjusted between 0 and 3. Many of these changes can also be applied in the session editor, but are provided here for a faster workflow. The American Football template is provided as a general template that should cover the needs of most users. However, should you find certain controls and wording needs to be modified for your own purposes, making the changes once, then saving a new template will save you a lot of time in the future. To save a new template, come to the Session menu and select Save Session as Template. Some settings are saved by default, but you can save session data according to your needs. We hope this tutorial video has been helpful in understanding the intricacies of the American Football session template. For a more detailed look at the generic session mode to create your own custom sport controls, be sure to watch our multi-part series on sessions and templates.